yeah, that's how it all really started. Never really looked back from that. It was one of the most surreal but amazing experiences that I've ever had. And obviously for me, it was a tremendous honour to represent the country of my mother's birth. So for me, that's been an unbelievable aspect of playing with the Philippine national team. It's just having those adventures that you wouldn't otherwise be able to enjoy, if I'd have stayed in England and pursued a career there. And then Scott and I got to work with Sven. I mean, obviously straight away, his pedigree is unbelievable. He's got some of the most, amazing teams on his CV. He's worked with some of the best players ever. So, just to be able to pick his brain and his knowledge of the game, second to none. On the one hand, I am disappointed with how my career turned out, but on the other hand, I've had some unbelievable experiences. I've travelled across the globe, played in front of 90,000 people, in front of 250 million people on television. I've taken my family to live in a beautiful country. I've lived every boy's dream in terms of becoming a professional footballer, so I can't be too disappointed with how things have turned out. It's just not how I imagined it or how I planned it when I was younger.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jack Towers from Sussex County FA, and with me I've got former Lewes, former Bognor Regis and former Philippines international, Chris Greatwich. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, thanks, Jack. How are you?
Yes, very good, very good. It's been quite a fascinating career, actually, your one. One we kind of stumbled across, and one where we've interviewed people in the past, and the Greatwich name always seems to sort of pop up anytime we interview someone.
Does it?
Yeah.
Fairly infamous family, I guess.
Yeah, you must be a very infamous family. So thought, got to be time that we get one of you on and have a sit down with you.
Sure, of course, yeah, pleasure to be on.
So just take us back to the start, really, Chris. Born in London yourself, wasn't it? Where did this kind of crazy footballing journey begin for you?
Yes, born in London. My mum and my dad met there in London. My dad was originally quite a nomadic character through his younger years. So my grandfather was a prison officer. So they sort of travelled around, and one of his stops was actually in Lewes. So my dad spent some of his teenage years in Lewes. And sort of later on in his teenage life, he moved up to London, met my mum, who'd come over from the Philippines. Then obviously, rather than raising a kid up in London, decided that a better place to raise a family would be in leafy East Sussex. So we moved down. We initially lived above Bill's, the greengrocers. It's not what it is now. It's not a swanky upmarket local produce huge restaurant chain now. It was just a regular greengrocers. We moved there in a flat above Bill's, and like sort of most kids, just my dad loved football. Gave me the bug. We would go down the park, or when my brothers came along, we would play in the garden. And that's just really where our love for the game spawned. I mean, obviously most of your friends at school played football. So just organically we sort of fell in love with the game. Probably one of my earliest memories is probably Italia 90. I can remember that competition quite vividly. And that's really where I first started becoming really fanatical about the sport. Off the back of that Gazamania and my love for Gary Lineker, I ended up being a Tottenham supporter. And then from there, really, that's where my sort of dreams and aspirations of wanting to become a footballer, that's where it all really stemmed from.
What's your memories of a kid playing then? Obviously, you had two brothers. Did that instill kind of a competitive aspect in you with two brothers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously being the oldest, it probably helps with that. My two younger brothers are probably more competitive than me. My middle brother especially, he's ultra competitive. He was the one who'd always get injured on holidays for riding his bike too fast, or I remember one time he was in a running race and ended up veering off course, falling down a ditch. He was ultra competitive. The middle brother syndrome is definitely a real thing. So he was probably the more competitive one. But my youngest brother was probably the biggest beneficiary of that. They're about 18 months apart my two younger brothers. So, while my middle brother always felt like he was the elder sibling in that relationship, my youngest brother was always sort of fighting to be his equal. So I think he was probably the beneficiary of that sort of sibling rivalry. Myself, I'm 3.5 years older than my middle brother and 5 years for my youngest. So it wasn't as competitive in the household with that, although we did have some tasty football games in the back garden where we were younger. But I think I was probably a little bit sort of too out of touch, out of range for them to really be competitive. Although, maybe more of an older role model, I would say, for the two younger boys, especially as my career took off, I guess something for them to aspire to more.
And what sort of like youth clubs did you play for back then when you were a kid?
So my first club was Lewes Bridgeview. Like a lot of people, my dad and another dad ended up taking the team. We were pretty poor, if I'm going to be honest. We would routinely get beaten by, some of the better Brighton teams. I remember playing against Hove Park Colts, but a lot of kids I would end up being friends with later down the years and getting beaten, 13-0, 14-1 and things like that. And we definitely didn't have one of the best local teams around, which is quite surprising because Lewes Bridgeview traditionally are quite a strong team and quite a lot of really good players have come out of that setup, which unfortunately is no longer there. But yeah, I just love playing. I just love playing at the Sunday League level. Was great. Like all my friends were there. I really, really enjoyed it. A lot of my friends from school played there. It was a great little club. You had the clubhouse at the top of the Malling Fields there. Parents would go there and have a drink after games and stuff. It was a really nice atmosphere. I really enjoyed playing for the club. And then obviously, as time wore on, things started to get a little bit more serious. So, I got picked up from Brighton after my first year at secondary school. And that's when I sort of had to move away from playing Sunday League with my friends and really focus on, trying to become a professional footballer. But no, I really enjoyed playing my Sunday League football with Lewes Bridgeview. It was a great breeding ground for me and a great way to develop my early career.
Yeah, well, I think that there's often a lot to be said, isn't there, about enjoying your football as well, and playing in a good atmosphere. How much of a change was that then going to Brighton, and all of a sudden you're in a much more competitive environment?
Yeah, it was different. I mean, Brighton isn't the Brighton that we know now. I mean, this was sort of in the midst of the ground share at the Priestfield, and the club was pretty much in disarray. The Archer and Belotti scenario was an ongoing thing throughout my teenage years at the club. So, it's very different to the Premier League, Category 1 status that they now hold. So, in that sense, it probably wasn't that much more professional, to be honest, than the grassroots level. That being said, I was very fortunate. There was a lot of really, really good players at the club at the time. So, Brighton was split into two centres. So we had a Seaford centre and a Worthing centre. So being from Lewes, Seaford was the closest centre. And although smaller, we actually had a really, really good group of kids in my year, and particularly the year above. So the year above me were people like Dean Hammond, Chris McPhee, who obviously went on to play for the first team and had pretty good professional careers. So I was regularly training with those older kids. And I think that's really where, I started to develop and really I progressed quite quickly, I think. That's when you see the difference. All those players there are pretty serious about wanting to become professional footballers. And that's different to, obviously your mates who you play with at Sunday League level. Those kids, some of them are into different things. Some of them, at that age, looking at girls and going out drinking and that sort of thing. Whereas I was hell bent on trying to become a professional footballer. So to be surrounded with other like-minded people was really important. And obviously that competitive environment just, it breeds that development and wanting to succeed. So, for me, although I didn't want to, I still wanted to go and train with my Sunday League team and play with my friends. It became evident pretty quickly that I wouldn't be able to do that. And so that's when I just focused on obviously my time at Brighton and trying to make it as a professional there.
That was going to be my next question, really. How that was your sole focus then, becoming a professional footballer. Did you have any other interests in at school or anything, or was you always going to be a footballer?
No, I mean, I was always quite academic. My mum and dad were quite keen on me, focusing on my studies. I probably didn't fulfill my potential in the classroom, but I made sure that especially like GCSE time when you really have to knuckle down, did okay and got some decent grades. You never know how it's going to pan out your football career. You never know injuries, bad luck, and anything can happen in our profession. I mean, it's probably the most competitive industry in the world, isn't it? Being a professional footballer, especially if you're in England. People from across the globe are obviously vying for positions at Premier League clubs. So, I understood that it was difficult, and you're always fed that only 1% of players make it to the professional level. But I was always quite confident within myself that I could make it in the game. I didn't realise I'd have such a meandering route into professional football. I thought it'd be a little bit more of a linear pathway. But I liked other things. I thought if I wasn't a footballer, I would like to have gone into journalism. I always really liked writing. Journalism or advertising, marketing, always liked those subjects at school. But if I'm honest, ever since I was really young, all I wanted to be was a professional footballer, and that's what I was really focused on doing at that time.
And obviously, you coach now, which we'll talk about later. But at that young age, was coaching ever something that was talked about with you as a potential pathway? Was it encouraged to sort of look at coaching as a pathway?
Not really, not when I was young. When I progressed into the youth team, we were really pushed to look at that. I mean, we did everything. We did referees licenses and first aid courses. I remember doing our UEFA, it would have been UEFA C, and UEFA B, it would have been now. I remember doing our practical tests for those as well. So Dean Wilkins was really adamant that we should try to get all that in order, because the football career is very short. So you need to prepare for the eventuality of retirement, or obviously injury, or just dropping out of the game in general. So I was very appreciative of that, but I never really considered that, especially at that age, teenage years. I didn't envisage myself becoming a coach afterwards. That wasn't something on my radar. I'd help out with my dad's teams, with my two younger brothers sometimes, and enjoyed that, but it was never really a vocation that I planned to do. Only sort of later on in my career did I think that would be something that would be of interest to me.
And so how did that time progress at Brighton then? Obviously you eventually got let go. What was those later years like at Brighton? How did it feel to get let go eventually?
Yeah, it was really tough. Sort of up to my under 16 year, I was fairly confident, comparing myself to other boys in and around our region at the same age group. I felt I was one of the better players. And then once you sign your scholarship, I think that's when it really starts to get competitive. And it isn't always the best player in the age group that makes it. There are loads of players who I saw growing up who were much better than me, who didn't make it. And there were lots of players who growing up weren't as good as me, who made a career in the game. A lot of it is, blossoming at the right time, taking opportunities when they present themselves. Luck has a lot to play with it as well. People in your position getting injured, or opportunities coming around from suspensions, or whatever that may be. And I didn't get those opportunities. We're a little bit unfortunate in the sense that we had 2 promotions and a relegation in my 3 years there, so it sort of limited the amount of opportunities that young players could potentially get. A lot of managerial changes also. I think we had something like 4 or 5 managers in that short span. But if I'm honest with myself, I probably didn't do enough. I was fairly confident going in, as I said, but I think somewhere along my first year, I lost a little bit of confidence, dropped and dipped in form a little bit, and sort of struggled to recover, really. It's quite a competitive cauldron, as I said, that period at Brighton. I think it was a very cutthroat time, and I think looking back, if it had been a more nurturing environment, perhaps it would have enabled me to be a little bit more successful. It was quite a sink or swim type of environment, and unfortunately, I was one of those who fell by the wayside. But not making any excuses, that was just how it was. And yeah, I was bitterly disappointed when I got released, because I felt that, although I hadn't had many opportunities, I felt I was good enough to make it at the club. And I think had I been given more opportunities, I really could have showcased myself. If we look back to sort of FA Youth Cups, we had really good FA Youth Cup campaigns, and I always performed extremely well in those types of scenarios. And I felt, in big pressure situations, if I was given a chance, I could really thrive. I felt on the big stage I could definitely show my worth. But at the end of the day, those opportunities didn't present themselves, and I found myself getting released, and obviously very difficult to take at the time, and it took me a long time to recover. Sort of rather than looking to go down the non-league route or dropping down a couple of divisions and see if I could pick up contracts there, I decided that I wanted to make a clean break, and that's when I opted to move to America.
And just before that, I mean, you talk about that youth team at Brighton. It was a fantastic youth team you had, and you had a good run in the FA Youth Cup, didn't you? That one year against, I think you lost to the eventual winners, Aston Villa, didn't you? What was that team like? There's some good names in there, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think they were any different to us. I think we were really unlucky in the game. Going into it, we beat Leicester in the round before, and they were quite highly regarded, and we beat them 3-2, but it was quite comfortable. We played really well. We were the better team. We had better players. We were better organised. It wasn't a fluke result. I think we played them 10 times. We beat them 7 or 8. It was a pretty good victory. So going into the Villa game, we all knew that they were pretty much the favourites to win the tournament that year. Word had got round that they had a good team. They had the Moore brothers at the time, who were, Stefan Moore, who went on to never really fulfil his potential. But he was probably one of the best players in my age group in the country at the time. And his brother Luke Moore up front, was a deadly finisher, scored a lot of goals through the rounds. Stephen Davis is now at Rangers, but went on to have an amazing career, mostly at the Premier League level. Where was it? Okay. Peter Whittingham, who sadly passed away, he was in that team. Liam Ridgewell, Wayne Henderson, who went on to play for Brighton. So, a lot of players who'd gone on to play at the very, very highest level. But we conceded two goals early on, and I think we missed a ton of chances. Goalkeeper made a couple of great saves. Where had we got sort of 2-1 going into half time, I think we maybe would have been able to push that agenda a little bit more. But it's no shame losing. They went on to win the tournament. They beat Wayne Rooney's Everton in the final, and I think they absolutely destroyed them in the final. So there's no shame in losing to them. But it was definitely a marker to say, look, we're on par with some of the best players, one of the best teams in the country. For me at that time, it was nice to sort of see what sort of level that we were at, and it just showed really that the youth setup at Brighton was really, really strong at that time.
And so on to America. What made you want to make that decision? Obviously, you mentioned not wanting to sort of drop down to the non-league sort of pathway. It must have been a big move to go over there away from your family.
Yeah, I'd seen a lot of players a few years older than me at the club, and they, done the 3-month, 6-month, year contracts here and there, and a lot of them ended up trickling down the leagues, sort of getting quite despondent with the game, and then either falling into non-league or not playing at all. I don't think much has changed really. I think that happens, to a lot of aspiring footballers, because it's a pretty traumatic experience once you get released. I didn't want to do that. I felt as though I needed a fresh challenge, something new. And the idea was sort of planted. A couple of friends of mine had gone over to America, a few years older than me, and they said how much they really enjoyed it. At the time, American college movies was all the rage. So, American Pie and all these sort of things. And I thought, it'd be a great, great opportunity for me to go and experience some of those things. I just wanted a fresh chance, fresh challenge. It was really as simple as that. It wasn't a case of me leaving my family. That really didn't bother me that much. But I was just ready to make a change, and it was an opportunity that really excited me, more so than trying to, I went on trial at Northampton. I went on had a trial at Cambridge United, and they invited me back. But if I'm being honest, it didn't really excite me. The opportunity to go to America, potentially get a degree as well, that was something that really excited me. I thought would be a better long-term plan, and just a more interesting life experience, really. So, although from a sort of career perspective, it probably wasn't the best decision. I probably would have been better off trying to stick it out or go down a non-league route to try and build myself back up again. But I don't regret it. I really, really enjoyed it. I had 3.5 wonderful years there, brilliant experience. And just loved being in America.
And what did it do for you as a player? How did you develop out there? You know, do you feel like you developed out there just as much as you would have in England?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that was one of the differences that I noticed. Was when I came back, I was 22, 23. And, most of the guys my age had already racked up probably 200 league games or 200 non-league games by that point. So, they were just more seasoned players by that point. We were playing sort of 20 games a season. It's quite a short and condensed season in America. So I probably played 80 games over the course of 3.5 years. So you're just not really accumulating those hours on the pitch in terms of game time. And obviously, again, the competitiveness is a bit varied. The first school I went to was pretty poor. The program was at Drury University wasn't the best. We would play against some good teams, but the recruitment wasn't the greatest. The team wasn't great. And then when I moved to New York, we actually finally had a really, really good team. Some boys that went on to play at a really high level. We had 2 or 3 boys who played in the Canadian national team. A couple of the guys who went on to play professionally. So, that was a really good experience, great team that I had in New York. But it's just, I think when I came back, although my dad always said, like in football years, I was quite young. I wasn't 23 because I hadn't sort of been in that hustle and bustle of playing in British football. But by the same token, once you're out of that, again, that sort of competitive culture and playing, day in, day out at a high level, I think it's tough to try to break in at sort of the higher levels once you step away from that. So, I went on trial at Kilmarnock, and that was where I went when I first came back to the UK. Did okay. They invited me back for pre-season, but I mean the setup there wasn't great, and that's when I opted to go down to Lewes, train with them, and then see what opportunities would arise from there. And in the end, that's when I sort of made the decision. Right, well, I'm probably going to try and go down the non-league route a little bit, get a job while I'm at it, and then see how things kind of progress from there. So that was really my reintroduction back into Sussex football again.
It must have been quite refreshing to come home to Lewes though as well, I suppose, playing with familiar faces, I suppose, as well.
I mean, yeah, that Lewes team not so much. There probably wasn't that many familiar faces. That was kind of Steve King era. I came in the year before they got promoted, so no, there wasn't that many local boys who I really knew. I think the only guys who I knew were sort of guys who I knew from my brother. So Jack Stern was there, like a second or third choice goalkeeper who's now in the MLS. He's coaching at FC Cincinnati with Jaap Stam, which is a pretty interesting.
We interviewed him recently.
Yeah, strange change from Lewes, but so Jack was there, and then a lot of the sort of Steve King crew, so like boys from London who he'd worked with before or knew. We had a lot of good individual players, but for whatever reason that year, I sort of ended up playing the second half of that season. But yeah, it didn't really click. A lot of those guys went on to have good careers, though. Leon Legg was there with me at the time. I was still in touch with, and obviously he went on to have a professional career. But yeah, I mean that team was a little bit disjointed, but managed to find sort of click into gear the following year and had a really good promotion run, and basically romped the title that season. But yeah, my first game actually was against Bognor, funny enough. My first start was against Bognor, and I scored down at the Nirewood. We drew 1-1 in that game. My debut was against Welling, I think, on the Saturday. We played them, I think, maybe the bank holiday Monday, something like that. It was quite a quick turnaround. But no, I enjoyed playing for my hometown club. Like, obviously a lot of people from the club I knew. I knew Martin Elliott from when I was a kid, who was involved with the club, and just people from the bar, people who were lifelong fans. So that was nice. And yeah, it is nice to sort of see people on the scene who I'd known since I was kids, still playing football on the Sussex scene. So that was, in that regard, it was refreshing to come back and see those familiar faces.
And what are your brothers doing at this point? Did you end up playing with them at all?
So I was at Lewes in the youth team, so he was sort of breaking into the first team a little bit. He'd been sort of on the bench or involved a couple of times, but never came on. My middle brother Phil was already in America by that point, so he wasn't. He'd left. He'd left. I don't think my middle brother Phil again was with the youth team, did well there, but I think a lot of his team ended up migrating to Burgess Hill when he was playing. So yeah, he didn't actually feature for the Lewes first team, but yeah. So they I was sort of a bit past my time. By the time I got back, they'd already sort of moved on or were about to.
What was he like to work for, Steve King?
I mean, he was good to me. Like I spoke to him and said, look, these are my aspirations that I want to try and play at the highest level. Initially I was just, can I come down and train for a bit? I'm from Lewes. Is that all right? He said, yeah, you can train. And quite quickly he involved me. He said, look, do you want to come down? He invited me after my first session, did quite well. He said, do you want to come down to Newport away? I was like, yeah, just okay. Ride the bus for 5 hours or whatever it was. And so in that sense, he was good. I mean, he offered me a 2-year contract. He wanted me to stay. I just felt that first team opportunities were going to be not limited because I always felt like I could play. But I had some good players at the team at the time. Paul Kennett, Simon Wormel, Gary Holloway. He went and signed some big name players that following summer as well. I saw people like Leon Legg not really playing that much, and I was thinking, well, Legg is a top player. He's not getting many games. Maybe I'd be better off trying to find somewhere where I could actually get, regular game time. And that's when Bognor expressed their interest. So they intimated that they wanted to sign me, and I had a lot of friends who were at the club as well. So I sort of jumped at the opportunity to go down there and play.
Dave Wheeler there at the time as well at Lewes?
No, so Dave's a year or two younger than my brother.
Right.
It's my youngest brother. So Dave, I think, would have still been at Brighton. Might have been 16 or 17. So would have come in maybe not that season, the season after I'd left.
Okay.
And that's when he broke through really. Because obviously Dave lives literally around the corner from where my mum and dad live. So we've known Dave since he was a kid. But he's obviously gone on to have an unbelievable career. Really, Dave's probably been one of the most successful players to come out of Lewes. So really proud of him, and amazing what he's done over his whole career.
So that onto Bognor, that's kind of your first, I suppose, season in England where you've had regular first team football. Then how was that?
Yeah, when you say regular, I mean the first sort of 4 or 5 months was regular, and then thereafter it was pretty in and out, pretty inconsistent. If I'm being honest with myself, I probably didn't perform how I wanted to. I had a great start. Performed really, really well. I mean, it didn't help that the club weren't, on a financially very secure footing, and managerial changes and sort of situation behind the scenes definitely didn't help. But that time in my personal life was quite difficult as well. I think I sort of struggled with that. I struggled with just my own sort of personal identity. I thought, you grow up and you want to be a footballer, and you think you should be a footballer, and you find yourself playing at I don't know, Dorchester away on a Tuesday night, and it's lashing down with rain. And I had an office job. I was working in recruitment at the time, which, wasn't, great money, and, it's a great job. Anyone who's working it, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I guess from my perspective, I thought it wasn't how my life, I expected it to have panned out. So I think I sort of struggled with that at that time. Looking back, I was probably a bit depressed. And just in that sort of rubbed off in my performances as a footballer, really. I don't think I really enjoyed playing. I didn't really showcase myself in the right way. I didn't play my best, and I think that was evident in the performance that I had at Bognor that year. So I was a bit patchy. I was very in and out, very inconsistent. I remember a couple of games where I felt like I was a world beater, and then the next week I'd be absolutely useless. And I know sort of mental health is a big thing. It's a bit of a buzzword, but it's been sort of prevalent and prominent in the last sort of year or so. But looking back, I was probably just really unhappy in my own sort of personal life, and I think that had a real reflection in how I performed. So it probably wasn't. Although I loved the club and some great teammates at Bognor at that time. Really, really enjoyed the lads there. But yeah, in terms of my performances, it wasn't the best, and I didn't really have the best season there.
And so when did this sort of idea of playing for the Philippines come? You know, did you ever see that as a possibility at any point?
We used to sort of talk about it when we were kids, because obviously we knew. I mean, like, everyone wants to play for England growing up. Let's be honest, right? Everyone wants to play for England. You know, when you're in the playground, you know, I was always Gazza or, you know, David Beckham, whatever, and you want to play for England because it's where I was from, and you know that's the pinnacle, isn't it? Playing for England in a World Cup or European Championships major tournament. That's growing up. That's what everyone wants to do. But you obviously know it's a more realistic option if you're going to play for the Philippines, because you know there aren't so many players. It's you know the caliber of player who's going to be playing there is going to be you know not as good. So you know that as a potential and viable option, something that we always talked about. Sometimes it was a little irreverent and sort of off the cuff comments, but you know those tongue-in-cheek comments I think actually had a little bit of resonance, and I think we decided, look, I want to pursue this. My mother's mother, so my grandmother, she passed away in 2003, I think. So my mum went over to the funeral in the Philippines, and that's when she first met the Football Federation and said, look, you know, I've got 3 boys, they all play. You know, what are the chances of them maybe coming over one time? And they sort of exchanged numbers and emails and such. And then a year later, I was invited to a training camp. So, you know, at my own expense, I flew out, and they said, look, we'll reimburse you if you make the team. I said, that's fine with me. So I was quite confident in getting in. And yeah, we went from sort of 50 players to 40 players to 30 players to finally making it into the squad proper. Yeah, we ended up going to, it was in Malaysia. We played against Myanmar in 2004. In what's now known as the Suzuki Cup, which was then known as the Tiger Cup, which was named after Tiger beer. And yeah, that's how it all really started. Never really looked back from that. It was one of the most surreal but amazing experiences that I've ever had. And obviously for me, it was a tremendous honour to represent the country of my mother's birth.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because I think you've gone from this situation where like you say, you were struggling as a player, and then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, you're an international footballer. Was that quite surreal at first?
It was, yeah, surreal, but I think a lot of it as well is you can kind of compartmentalise it a little bit. Like no one really knows who you are there. You've got some pedigree. Obviously, people can see that by your CV. But the coach we had, Aris Kaslib, he wasn't really interested in that. He sort of took you at face value, and it was more the other things. We stayed in a pretty awful dormitory to begin with. It wasn't very nice. It wasn't a plush hotel or anything like that. So, you really had to muck in and get your head down and work hard. Despite the difficult circumstances, and I was willing to do that. I think a lot of players probably would have been, it's not for me. We're not being well looked after. But I was just really, really keen on playing, and that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I was willing to do. So, yeah, I mean, it was surreal, to call yourself an international footballer, because obviously that's what you dream about as a kid. It was definitely not how I envisaged it as a kid, but it was definitely something that I was really, really proud of. And extremely fortunate to go on to have, to make 50 appearances for the national team. I've had some unbelievable games, experiences, been to, God knows how many different countries. So for me, that's been an unbelievable aspect of playing with the Philippine national team. It's just having those adventures that you wouldn't otherwise be able to enjoy, if I'd have stayed in England and pursued a career there.
It must have been obviously the icing on the cake for your 2 brothers to kind of play for the Philippines as well. How proud was your mum to sort of see all her 3 sons play for the Philippines?
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I've played with both my brothers, but we never played all 3 together, which that would have been really nice.
Yeah,
never happened. But the following, after I made my debut, there was the Southeast Asian Games was held here in the Philippines, and my middle brother Phil, he played in that competition and I didn't. So So he got to experience it from his own perspective, with his own eyes. So that was a really good experience for him. And then the two of us were called up for the following camp the following year for the ASEAN Championships, and we both played together in that. So that was the first time that the two of us as brothers got to play together with a national team, which was great. We then played an AFC Challenge Cup together, I think, with me and Phil, and that was the last time we played together. But then the following tournament, me and my youngest brother Simon, we played together, and then we played in probably a handful of tournaments together, sort of later on in our career. So yeah, that we've probably been able to spend more time together at international games and competition. So yeah, the two of us have had quite an enjoyable international career together, which is nice.
And what are you doing from a club perspective at this point? You know, our post Bognor Regis, if you like.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, this is where it's sort of unconventional set of circumstances, really. I mean, after Bognor, I went to a couple of different clubs. Went to Hastings. Yeah, that didn't work out. I went to Burgess Hill. Wanted to sign me, but I'd really just had enough. I'd had enough of football, so I decided I was just going to jack it in. So I just stopped playing for about a year. Yeah, spent my Saturdays going around shopping malls and yeah, just going down the park and hanging out. Yeah, I wasn't really doing anything, to be honest with you. I just pretty disillusioned with the game as a whole, and yeah, just stopped playing. For me at the time, just football really wasn't on my radar. I had no intention of playing anymore, so I just gave it up, which sounds quite ridiculous because I picked it up and just played later on in my career, but not many people know this. But yeah, I sort of stopped playing for about a year. And then within about sort of 6 months into that, I was like, no, I need to do something. So my wife and I ended up going on a round the world trip. So I jacked in my job and then went on a round the world trip, just went traveling. And yeah, we really, really enjoyed that. My girlfriend at the time, now wife. So we went, yeah, all over, all through Southeast Asia, Australia, America. But while I was on the trip, we made the decision that we wanted to move back to America. So that's kind of where my coaching career sort of took off then. So we decided that I was going to move to America and try to pursue coaching. If I'm being honest, it wasn't really, it was more the idea of moving back to America was what interested me. The idea to start my life afresh and seek new opportunities. That was really what I was after, and coaching was the vehicle. It wasn't that I had an aspiration to become, the world's best football coach. So I managed to land a job coaching in New Jersey, and yeah, just really enjoyed it. Really took to it. Really liked working with the kids. Found that I was able to build quite a good rapport with players and enjoyed delivering sessions. And you went quite quickly from being a novice coach to being fairly proficient. We were doing 3 sessions a day, every day, 7 days a week for 45 weeks of the year, probably more actually. So, you're really honing your craft. So I was there for 5 years. And all of a sudden, like you're really racking up a lot of hours compared to what you would be as a regular coach here in the UK. So I always say in coaching years, I'm much older than I actually am. I'm probably about 50 with the amount of hours that I spent on the grass. But that's really what ignited my passion for it. And then somewhere within that as well, I ended up going back and playing again. We had a semi-pro men's team that played in the NPSL, just a couple of tiers lower than the MLS. And yeah, just got asked to play in it. And then, for no money, didn't get paid. Just started playing again, and that's when it sort of rekindled my love and my passion and enthusiasm for playing. And yeah, I began to love football again, which is really nice, not just from a coaching perspective, but from a playing perspective as well. And that's really what gave me the sort of drive and the ambition to wanting to sort of progress my career a little bit further on the playing end, because I know at sort of 27, 28, there was that window of opportunity was starting to close. And I was just very, very fortunate. The opportunity to come back to the Philippines was presented to me through the KFC Academy, which is the club that I now work for. But I also was able to play for that team as well. And yeah, that was really. I mean, that was fairly late. I think I was 29 when I finally broke into professional football. It was, although long overdue in my eyes, it was a brilliant experience for me to finally get a taste of pro football.
But at the same time, though, it must have, just like you say, it must have been just a bit of a weight off your shoulders in a way, because it's what you wanted all the time. Obviously, you had your struggles, but then all of a sudden, you finally you got that title of a professional footballer. It must have felt amazing.
Yeah, it's nice. It was nice. It's just not how you envisaged it. Like as a young kid, you think it's going to be, you sign a schoolboy, you get your scholarship, you get a pro contract, you break into the first team, and then that's you away. But very few careers are like that, not just in football, but in any walk of life. So to finally have that opportunity, it was brilliant. I think I played 3 or 4 seasons as a professional. I loved it and I savoured it, and I probably I attacked it like I was a 19-year-old, in terms of always getting to training early, eating right, sleeping right, staying extra to do work. People probably thought I was a bit crazy, because by this point I probably had 30 international caps, and I was 29, 30 years of age, running around like I was 19. But I just didn't want to waste that opportunity once I had it. And in retrospect, had I been more like that at 17, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation. Maybe we're having a very different one. So, but for me, it was important that I savoured that opportunity, because I knew this was my last chance, and I had to make the most of it. But in those 4 years, I played very, very well. I think team did very well individually. I did very well, and the league here, although it was an upstart league, fledgling league, there's a lot of really good players. A lot of players with really, really good caliber, really good pedigree came to the league and played, and not all of them was as successful as I was. So in that regard, it's nice that I was able to enjoy playing professional football, albeit at a much later stage than I thought I would. When I was growing up, having aspirations of being a professional footballer.
And so how long did you stay there from a playing perspective then? Did it get to a point where you wanted to just sort of take coaching on your shoulders?
Yeah, so basically our club had a fairly tumultuous 3-4 years when I was here. We went through quite a few managers, and I'd taken over on an interim basis on a number of occasions. And whenever I had, we did particularly well. Obviously, at 31, 32, I wasn't really necessarily thinking about taking it on as a full-time gig, because I felt as though I still had a lot more to give as a player. But towards the last season as a player, we ended up going through our domestic cup competition, and we got through to the final. And that's really when I thought, right, if we win this, we would qualify for the AFC Cup, which is like the equivalent of the Europa League. So we sort of in and ahhing as to whether or not I would like to take this on full time, because I felt I was the guy to do it. And if someone else had come in, I felt like it would have undone a lot of the hard work that I'd done. So, we made an arrangement for me to be sort of a player coach, but player was definitely very loose. That was more of a in case of emergencies type scenario. Fortunately, I never had to activate that clause. And that's really when I embarked on being a full-time manager. I had 3 years with the first team. Really enjoyed that. 2 domestic cup victories. Runner-up finish in my last year. A couple of good positions in the other 2 years. So, all round it was 3 really, really good seasons that I had at the helm. And then sort of towards that last year, that's when the opportunity to work with the Philippine national team came around, and I'd already been doing a dual role with the club while working with the academy, which I co-own. So the KFC Academy is it was started before I arrived, but in 2013 when I took it over, we had a sort of revamp. We went from around 50 or so players to, well, pre-pandemic it was about 1,000. We had about 1,000 kids, so pretty much the largest football academy in the Philippines. Number of good teams, a lot of players that have gone on to play professionally, internationally, or gone abroad. So from that perspective, it was going really, really well. So I wanted to stay attached to the club. But the opportunity to work with the national team for me just seemed a natural progression in my coach development. And that's when I decided that I wanted to try and put my best foot forward really with that particular role, and join the Philippine national team on a more regular basis.
And you eventually went on to work with Sven there, didn't you? Sven Eriksson. What was that like? What was it like to work under a guy like Sven?
Yeah, I mean, really, really good. I mean, it was a crazy year. I mean, Philippines is quite volatile in general, but the football scene is no different. So I initially came in to assist Thomas Dooley, who might not be too familiar with sort of local people, but Thomas was an American international. I think he played about 100 times, 2 World Cups, captain, played at Schalke, Kaiserslautern in Germany, unbelievable career. He took me on. I played under him when he was a national team coach, and then he brought me in as an assistant. And my mandate really was to help us get to the Asian Cup, which was going to be in 2019. So I came in 2018 to work alongside him, and we managed to make good on our promise to get the team there, which was great. But unfortunately, his contract wasn't renewed. So we went a sort of long-winded way to getting Sven. We went via Terry Butcher. So Terry Butcher initially got the job and then quit without even coming to the Philippines or taking a game. I don't really know what the situation was there. And then I started working with Scott Cooper, who is Irish coach who had worked in the UK at Leicester's Academy, and it really made his name for himself in Thailand. He had a couple of really, really good stints with some Thai clubs. And then he and I went about sort of setting up the team for the forthcoming Suzuki Cup and then the Asian Cup, which was in the new year. So we took over the reins, did really well in a couple of the friendlies that we did. But Sven came in about 2 weeks before the Suzuki Cup and took over as head coach. And there's a bit of a sort of coaching reshuffle. And then Scott and I got to work with Sven. I mean, obviously, straight away, his pedigree is unbelievable. He's got some of the most, amazing teams on his CV. He's worked with some of the best players ever. So, just to be able to pick his brain and his knowledge of the game, second to none. I mean, probably for me, not so much sort of the tactical side or the football side. That wasn't necessarily the most eye-opening thing about working with Sven. It was more the opportunities to sit with him one-on-one and have chats with him about the game. That was really the most sort of insightful aspects about working with him. He was quite an early riser, same as me, so we would go down to breakfast quite early in the morning. And lo and behold, it was usually just him and I at the breakfast table. So we would sit and we would talk. And I grew up watching Football Italia, Channel 4 back in the early 90s, and he was the coach at Lazio at the time, and he would tell me stories of some of the players that he had there. People like Mancini and Signori and Mihailovic and these unbelievable players who I grew up watching on television. And he'd tell me stories about these guys and how he had he worked with Roberto Baggio, for example. One of my all-time idols growing up. And obviously the stories that he had with the England team was unbelievable, just incredible that he had that sort of golden generation and almost did so well with that team. So that was really the most the enthralling aspect of working with Sven. It wasn't so much the football side; it was more on a human level, being able to sit down and talk to him and chat with him about some of these incredible players and experiences that he encountered.
And other than Sven, was there anyone previous to that you sort of worked under that you thought you wanted to take bits from their coaching?
Yeah, I mean, all of them are different. So you try and take all of them and then sort of mould your own style or add that to your, management repertoire. Like Scott Cooper was an amazing manager in terms of his man management, brilliant. His staff management, brilliant. How he organises, his meetings, his attention to detail. His methodical approach, that sort of thing. I really enjoyed working under him. He's someone I learned a lot from. With Sven, he was more calm, more mild mannered, and probably exactly how most people would imagine him to be. But also that type of approach, I think, lent itself quite well with certain individuals. That is calmness, is he was personable. So in that sense, that was really good. With Thomas Dooley, for example, he had like an unwavering faith in certain individuals. So when he really believed in you, you could do no wrong. And one of those things he had unwavering belief in was his own philosophy, which at times, I couldn't see it. I didn't understand why he would make certain selections or make certain decisions, but he had absolute faith in decisions that he was making. And I think that's also important, that sort of conviction in your decisions and living and dying by those decisions. And, ultimately, his tenure will be remembered for getting Philippines to the Asian Cup, which is something that no one had ever done up until that point. So, I always try to take something from, even if it's bad, take the bad things from coaches and think, right, well, if I was in that situation, I would have done that differently, and I'll make sure that I don't do that when such and such, experience happens with me. So yeah, I mean, you can always learn, and I've been very, very fortunate to work with some really, really good coaches in such a short period of time, and hopefully it's things that I can put into my own, day-to-day coaching habits and working habits that I have when we get back onto the pitch again.
So what is it you're kind of on now? Is you at Kaya now still? Are you back there coaching?
Yeah, still at Kaya, but yeah, coaching is not permissible at the moment. It's the lockdown situation is still ongoing here. So I think we're past 500 days now. It's actually the longest lockdown in the world.
Oh, wow.
So there's not really much football going on at the moment. So it's more online Zoom sessions and then small individual sessions, small groups, one-to-ones, where permitted. So that's really what I'm looking at right now. But even in that regard, it's sort of testing me in other ways, curriculum development or, adapting to the situations that we find ourselves in and developing a program that fits for the circumstance that we find ourselves in. So, it's not ideal. It's not what I would like to be doing. How much I would be on the grass and working with the kids, or on the grass working with a men's team, adults team, professional team. But it's just not possible at the moment, unfortunately.
And where are you at, sort of qualifications wise, with coaching?
Yeah, so I did my A license. So I was very fortunate to Northern Ireland do an A license course that's primarily for professional players. So I managed to get on that course 2 years ago. I started 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a pretty star-studded course that I was able to get on. It was pretty much a who's who of players that I'd grown up watching and idolising. And we had people like Ricardo Carvalho was on the course, Jolien Lescott, Stephen Pienaar, Paul Robinson,
Wow.
Richard Dunn. Yeah, it was. I'm missing loads of people out here. Thiago Mendes. It was honestly, it was like a who's who of people who I'd grown up watching and playing. And obviously going on to the coaching course, it was quite nerve-wracking. But once you get into the coaching, that was really where I was able to sort of showcase myself. I'm not going to be able to take Ricardo Carvalho on in a 1v1, even though he's a slightly older gentleman now. But I am able to come out and deliver a session to him or explain to him, this is how I want you to organize a session. This is how you should deliver this session. And that's really where I was able to come into my own and really enjoyed that that coaching course. So that enabled me to get my A license. I'd like to get my pro license fairly soon also. And obviously once that's done, your UEFA pro license is a ticket to obviously work anywhere on the planet. So that's something that I would like to do. Once this situation clears up, is obviously try to test myself at the highest possible level. Where that will be, I don't know yet. But it was a great course. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'd advise anybody who is interested in getting into coaching, try and get your coaching badges as early as possible, and get some really good experience under your belt, because it's a very competitive industry, isn't it? Football coaching. There's so many people out there who want to be a coach. So try and get on it early, get as much experience as you can. Because I didn't. I waited too long to get all that under my belt. I wish I'd done that a lot earlier.
And how do you reflect on your sort of career as a whole?
Oh, it's a good question. You know what? I don't really know, is my honest answer. I don't really know. I don't lose any sleep over it, put it that way.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I feel as though I've massively underachieved. I look at myself. Maybe I've got a warped perspective of myself. I was always confident. I always felt, I was, best player in my age group. I always thought I could break into Brighton's first team. I felt once I was there, I'd be able to just go through the levels and play at the highest level. That's, if I'm being honest, that's how I saw it panning out for me. But it didn't happen that way. And I don't blame anyone for that. I'm not bitter anymore. I'm not resentful to anyone. Do I think I could have been handled differently? 100%. Do I think I could have got more opportunities? Yes. But that's just not how it is. You can't be bitter. I think a lot of people that are out there, and they can't get over that and never recover. So on the one hand, I am disappointed with how my career turned out, but on the other hand, I've had some unbelievable experiences. I've travelled across the globe. Played in front of 90,000 people, in front of 250 million people on television. I've taken my family to live in a beautiful country. I've lived every boy's dream in terms of becoming a professional footballer. So I can't be too disappointed with how things have turned out. It's just not how I imagined it or how I planned it when I was younger. But I think really for me, being able to represent my country, obviously where my mum was born and raised, that really has cemented, my legacy as a footballer, and that's something that I'm most proud of, and that's the thing that probably enables me to be like, no, it's okay, it's worked out all right. But no, I mean, I don't really dwell on it, to be honest. I've never really spent too much time wondering about, what if or what could have been. I'm just really thankful for a lot of the opportunities that I've had over the time of my footballing career, and just really looking forward to whatever the future holds for me.
And just lastly, really, what sort of advice would you give to young aspiring footballers in Sussex?
Well, my two sons are right now.
Right.
So, I think the most important thing for me is just to make sure that you enjoy it. It sounds pretty cliche, but I think there's a lot of pressure on kids these days, social media, especially to try and achieve things early, to try and achieve things quickly. And there are no shortcuts. You have to do the time, you have to put in the effort, you have to do the training. You've also got to love it. I love playing football. When I didn't love football, I stopped playing. No one forced me into it. My dad liked football and he encouraged me to do it, but he never forced me. I saw loads of players growing up who I felt didn't really like it, but for whatever reason, were pushed into doing it, or stop enjoying it because they were wanting to do other things or got into other things. And if you really love it, those other things like girls or drinking and those other things, smoking, they're not sacrifices. People talk about making sacrifices. I never saw it as a sacrifice, not really going out, or I wasn't a big drinker or anything. I wouldn't go to parties or anything like that. I didn't see it as a sacrifice. It's just what you did because you wanted to become a footballer. And if you do see it as a sacrifice, then maybe it's you don't love it or you don't want it as much as you think you do. So, as long as you're enjoying it, as long as you're passionate about the sport, then that's good enough in itself. If it transpires that you got talent and you progress in it, then do everything you can to try to be the best footballer that you can be. Don't let anyone stop you. Don't let anyone try to get you off track. But, and try to be true to yourself. That's one thing I found as went on in my career. So the more I just try to play for myself and try to rather than trying to please other people, trying to please a coach or trying to please fan base. If you're fortunate enough to play in front of a big fan base, just do it because you want to do it. So play how you want to play. If it all falls flat in its face, it's okay because you did it your way and you did it how you wanted to do it. That's something that if I was to give my younger self a bit of advice, that's what I would give him. I would say, look, don't try and play for a coach. Don't try and play to please other people. Just express yourself and do what makes you happy. So I think I see a lot of players, even at my son's age, I see a lot of people that don't look happy. Yeah. When my son scores, he celebrates like an absolute lunatic. He's doing somersaults, he's doing everything, and that's what it's about. The joy of football is that's really that at its essence is the game. So as long as you're happy, enjoying football, that's the most important thing, and all the other things will come, as a result of your passion and enthusiasm. Don't sort of force it. Don't be in any hurry to get into academies and become a professional footballer at 8 years old. It's all going to happen in due course if you enjoy it and you're passionate about it.
Chris, thank you very much. It's been fascinating. Could probably talk to you all day, but no, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I appreciate it.